Lore. Lore? Lore. We all love lore. Little tidbits of info, little nuggety boys that make the fictional worlds we inhabit instead of dealing with our real problems come alive. Lore can enhance a story in so many ways, from adding new emotional depth to seemingly innocuous narrative elements to birthing whole new stories from the implications of their existence. However, they can also cock everything right up. Let's talk about Listen. Season began episode Baker of Communist Space Panto Doctor Who. Listen does all kinds of fun things with lore, from showing the first Doctor as a tiny wee baby to introducing a time travel plot that can't exist because of the season finale rendering it impossible. Yeah, it's a mess, a stylish, extremely well acted and directed mess, but a mess. However, there's one thing it's got going on that elevates it far above and beyond the sum of its parts. Ambiguity. We never find out what the supposed monster capable of perfect hiding that drives the Doctor on this obsessive quest is, or even if there is a monster capable of perfect hiding that drives the monster on this obsessive quest. For all we know, it doesn't exist, and the entire thing is born from childhood trauma inflicted by Clara. Or it could be right behind you at this very moment, watching you like and subscribe to this channel. And I have to applaud Stephen Don't Stop Believing Moffat on his restraint here, given that he's a man who views the concept of restraint the same way most would view a prostate exam. By the way, did you know that Time Lords don't have prostates? Lore! He could have very easily ruined this by revealing that it was a trap or a simulation or a trap in a simulation, but instead, he stuck to his guns and delivered a sloppy, yet very satisfying piece of Communist Space Panto Doctor Who. But this piece of Communist Space Panto Doctor Who only works as well as it does because it doesn't provide a concrete answer to its question. And that's kind of brilliant, really. And then John Barrowman rubs himself all over it like it's Katie Cassidy's trailer. In R&J, the last story he did with Big Finish before being blacklisted for not keeping his John and his Barrow, man, Captain Jack Harkness and River Song have a really weird romance that largely revolves around being silver medal to the Doctor, including almost ruining the final scene in Husbands of River Song. However, the bit that actually matters to this video involves them walking up to a door heavily implied to be questionably canonical time traveler Orson Pinks and giving it a good old knock. It's just, just a little laugh. Isn't it funny? Isn't it fun? So yeah, all that ambiguity wrapped up in the deepest core of the Doctor's psyche? Nah, it was just a prank, bro. Who cares if it completely deflates the original story if the main reason it was good? It was just a little jokey joke. The allure of lore in storytelling is undeniable. It adds layers of depth, emotion and intrigue to fictional worlds, and while lore can be a powerful tool when used with precision and grace, it can also be a dangerous one. What are some examples of expanded lore undermining the larger story you can think of? Let me know in the comments. The Scream of the Shalka! The Scream of the Shalka! The Scream of the Shalka! The Scream of the Shalka, the animated attempt to revive Doctor Who, graced screens in November and December of 2003 to mark the show's 40th anniversary, featuring the melodious voice of a very, very bored Richard E. Grant as the kinda sorta not really Ninth Doctor, an incarnation that seems to be going through a full-on dramatic goth phase, with a melancholy energy and a wardrobe that could best be described as Dracula chic. Cosgrove Hall bestowed upon us this flash animated opus, a masterpiece to rival the Sistine Chapel according to people who haven't watched it. But lo and behold, fate had a cruel twist in store. The live action revival, led by Russell T. Davies, immediately relegated the Scream of the Shalka to unbound status, a term so aptly vague it's as if the universe itself shrugged in ambivalence. But someone who wasn't ambivalent was Davies himself, dropping the absolute ether on Grant's portrayal. I wasn't a fan of Richard E. Grant in it, I have to say, and yes, you can print that. I thought he was terrible. I thought he took the money and ran, to be honest. It was a lazy performance. He was never on our list to play the Doctor. So, what actually happens in Scream of the Shalka? Well, the kinda sorta not really Ninth Doctor finds himself in the quaint village of Lannet, Lancashire, a place where dread is in the air and fear is the only language the locals speak. And then aliens show up. Enter Alison Cheney, a barmaid who aids our Doctor in battling the nefarious Shalka, lurking beneath the village and making their preparations to add Earth to their empire of 1 billion worlds! So then they run into some aliens and there's some peril, and also the Master is there for some reason, but everything's basically fine in the end. It's Doctor Who, you know how Doctor Who works. This is a Doctor Who YouTube channel. Subscribe to my Doctor Who YouTube channel! Paul Cornell drew inspiration from the War in Heaven in constructing this new Who Doctor's status quo, with the Doctor seeming to suffer from PTSD due to a recent terrible conflict. RTD also drew inspiration from the War in Heaven by ripping it off. Seriously though, it is interesting to compare and contrast how Cornell and Davis approached the 8th Doctor novels, with Davis completely refusing to acknowledge them while also taking heavy inspiration, and Paul Cornell vaguely hinting they happened while not committing to them and completely alienating outsiders in the process. It's also interesting to note that the novels were seemingly being written to tie into Scream of the Shalka, with this incarnation of the Master, played by Derek Jacobi weirdly enough, showing up as an incorporeal spooky man in Sometime Never, the Deadstone Memorial, and the Gallifrey Chronicles. But alas, the universe has a cruel sense of humour. Plans for sequels were as fleeting as a Time Lord's regeneration cycle in a blender, shelved indefinitely as the BBC's live-action revival took flight. And the rest, as they say, is history. It's interesting to look back at the many different attempts to bring Doctor Who back to our screen, and think about all the different parallel universes where Shalka, the Leakley Bible, or the Dark Dimension ended up being the silver bullet that brought Doctor Who back. Parallel worlds can be strange and uncertain places, but one thing we can be certain of is the fact that David Tennant ended up being the Doctor in every single one of them. Did you know that Doctor Who is a pile of hack, fraud, rip-off, trash? Explain! No. Okay, fine. Roll up, you horrible bunch of reprobates! Today we're diving deep into the world of Dr. Omega. Wait, what? Doctor Who? Never heard of it. You talking rubbish? You wanna We're talking about the OG here, son! The French flavour of temporal troublemaker, Dr. Omega! Picture it, 1906, a French writer named Arnold Gallopin whips up a character who, in a stunning turn of events, turns out to bear a striking resemblance to beloved cultural icon and time-travelling hero, Gary Seven. So, Dr. Omega takes his neighbours Dennis and Fred on a wild ride to Mars in a spaceship called either the Excelsior or the Cosmos, depending on which edition you read. Apparently, the ship was made of a special material, which gave it the power to repel space and time, which allowed the vessel to travel across the ether. Subsequent stories featuring Dr. Omega took the conventional playbook and chucked it out the window. In the Dr. Omega Chronicles, our ether-travelling hero ditches the good ship Cosmos for a snazzier ride. He's now cruising in a time ship of his own creation, and they've even slapped a name on it. The Gallopin, a nod to the guy who birthed this whole Dr. Omega spectacle in the first place. What a guy. But wait, there's more. In fact, we haven't even begun to explore the dimension-hopping madness. In Dr. Omega's parallel adventures, Docky, Omega and Dennis decide that our universe is so last season. They snag a new ship, the Tuna, and it's not your typical sleek spacecraft, let me tell you that, son. Nope, it's shaped like a really big boulder. Why? Because apparently, in the multiverse, fitting in is everything, and a boulder is apparently the one thing in the multiverse that fits in anywhere. Sure. In 2003, the elusive Dr. Omega resurfaced thanks to the keen eye of Doctor Who historian Jean-Marc Lefisier. Examining the illustrations, Lefisier couldn't help but notice a striking resemblance between Dr. Omega and William Hartnell's first Doctor, the hottest one, by the way. The plot itself seemed like a long-lost sibling to typical Doctor Who shenanigans. Seizing the opportunity, Lefisier embarked on a linguistic odyssey, birthing an English version of Dr. Omega, part translation, part retelling, part colonialism. The English rendition, adorned with a cover by the talented Gil Formosa, aimed to channel the nostalgic vibes of classic 70s Doctor Who. Launched in 2003 by Black Coat Publishing to coincide with Doctor Who's 40th anniversary, the book featured a foreword by the legendary Terrence Dicks. A more authentic, unabridged English translation followed, courtesy of the distinct yet similarly named American publisher, Black Cat Publishing. What motivated these alterations, you ask? Well, Lefisier had a cunning plan. He envisioned Dr. Omega not as a mere human scientist, but as an alias, assumed by the actual First Doctor before the events of an unearthly child. Omega now casually hinted at having a granddaughter and dropped some hints about fellow space-time vessel creators from another mysterious country. Descriptions of Martian species encountered by Dr. Omega underwent a makeover, suggesting evolution into the Ice Warriors and H.G. Wells' Martians for some reason. The text even threw in a suggestion that Dr. Omega and Dennis had ventured not only across space, but several billion years into the past, rewriting Mars's depiction from the original text as a bustling hub of life in 1905. Time travel and retconning. This really is Doctor Who. After contributing twice to Tales of the Shadowmen, the seasoned Doctor Who writer John Peel took a leap into the audio realm. He penned a full-cast audio drama titled The Silent Planet for Who Dares Publishing in 2017, accompanied by a quick prequel comic named Galapagos Planet. The plot? Dr. Omega, tired of rubbing shoulders with boulders, takes a detour through alternate universes, a move that screams deja vu to Doctor Who fans. Pitched as the inaugural installment in the ambitious series Dr. Omega's Parallel Adventures, the tale set the stage for multiverse-hopping escapades. However, much to the irritation of fans, subsequent releases never materialized. Instead, Who Dares Publishing shifted gears and unleashed the Dr. Omega Chronicles in 2018, a novel series placing our time-traveling hero front and center. This new endeavour made a conscious effort to distance itself from Peel's prior Dr. Omega projects, especially his audio series Dr. Omega's Parallel Adventures. A fresh Dr. Omega logo hit the scene, and any notions that Dr. Omega might be anything other than human got the boot from the marketing department. Despite Dr. Omega's deep roots in the behind-the-scenes tapestry of licensed Doctor Who media and the subtle nods within its own narrative to existing within the Doctor Who universe, explicit references from Doctor Who to Dr. Omega have remained elusive. The only breadcrumbs we have are a theory suggested by Lefissier and later echoed by Who Dares Publishing's official website. According to this speculation, the Gallifreyan novel might have left its fingerprints on the creation of an unearthly child. It's like Dr. Omega whispered his cosmic secrets to the First Doctor, leaving us with an intergalactic game of telephone. That or plagiarism. While Dr. Omega hasn't snagged a primetime spot in Doctor Who history yet, the character's influence creeps into the Doctor Who literary landscape. Several releases in the Lethbridge Stewart series mention an imaginary Dr. Omega TV series, acting as the quirky cousin to Doctor Who's TV dominance in the 20th century. Wait, when they say imaginary, do they mean that it's a TV show inside the universe of Doctor Who? Or do they mean that Lethbridge Stewart imagined it when he was on like Salvia or something? I need answers. Give me answers, people. If we fast forward to 2022 though, we might have found a debut for Dr. Omega in the Doctor Who universe. Kinda. Sorta. If you squint a little. In Robert Shepard's faction Paradox tale, there's a character who's very, very similar to Dr. Omega named Helvetius. Helvetius reminisces about outlandish adventures on Mars with Fred and Dennis. The story unfolds to elucidate why Mars doesn't quite match the version portrayed in the Dr. Omega saga. So what does all this mean? Is Doctor Who really just a rip-off of an obscure 20th century French sci-fi character? Maybe. I mean, Sidney Newman is Canadian, and Canada is basically France, so... The Cartmel Master Plan. The Cartmel Master Plan. The Cartmel Master Plan. A term coined by fans and popularised by Doctor Who magazine, embodying a vision to reintroduce enigma and depth to the character of the 7th Doctor during the later seasons of the classic series of Doccy Who. And with Michael Grade breathing down their necks like the Grim Reaper, it's not hard to see why. The genesis of the Cartmel Master Plan can be traced back to the collective efforts of script editor Andrew Cartmel and his crack team of writers, including Mark Platt and and Ben Aranovich. Their aim was clear, to restore the sense of mystery surrounding the Doctor and the Time Lords, which had somewhat diminished due to overexposure and familiarity over the years. And by overexposure and familiarity over the years, I mean the invasion of time. The purpose of the Master Plan was not to concoct a detailed storyline, but rather to go with a good old-fashioned mystery box, revolving around the Doctor's true origins. While Cartmel himself emphasised that the plan was more about creating a mood and direction than providing definitive answers, it ended up having a deep impact on how Who told stories going forward, from novels to audios to, once subjected to a cheeky bit of necromancy, the TV show itself. Don't believe me? Well, think about this. Bad Wolf, mystery box. Torchwood, mystery box. Mr. Saxon, mystery box. The bees are disappearing, mystery box. The cracks in the universe, mystery box. You get the idea. The core of the Cartmel Master Plan revolved around the revelation that the Doctor was a reincarnation of the enigmatic figure known as the Other, a pivotal character from Gallifrey's past that had never been mentioned before the Cartmel Master Plan. Anyway, he's credited with helping shape Time Lord society as one of the Big Three alongside Rassilon and some other loser. Although this narrative thread was never fully explored on screen due to the show's cancellation, it found its fruition in other forms, notably the Virgin New Adventure series, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Seasons 25 and 26 of Doctor Who provided subtle yet compelling hints towards this new direction, from cryptic references about the Doctor's true nature to encounters with ancient adversaries and demonstrations of newfound abilities. The narrative landscape was carefully crafted to tantalize viewers with glimpses of a larger, interconnected storyline, from remembrance of the Daleks having the Doctor execute a plan they had started in their first incarnation and a not so subtle hint that he was the founder of Time Lord Society, to Battlefield's revelation that a future version of the Doctor would go on to become Merlin or something. To Ghostlight, I think. What's Ghostlight about again? The unfulfilled potential of the Cartmel Master Plan extended beyond television scripts. Had the series continued into a planned season 27, can you imagine, audiences might have witnessed Ace's transformation into a Time Lord under the Doctor's tutelage, and reshaping Gallifreyan policies with her percussive approach to problem solving. The Cartmel Master Plan also found expression in other media avenues, such as comic strips and novels. These extensions delve deeper into the Doctor's unknown history, portraying him as a morally complex and enigmatic figure, earning him monikers like the Dark Doctor, or the Arch Manipulator, or Edgy McEdgerson from Edgytown. And this is the part where we talk about Longbarrow. Longbarrow by Mark Platt set out to accomplish an ambitious task. Give the Doctor a definitive origin story. Picture the Doctor reluctantly squeezing into his old robes, grumbling all the way back to his ancestral home, the House of Longbarrow. Inside, he uncovers more drama than a thing that involves a lot of drama, finding out that he was once the enigmatic Other. Talk about an awkward trip home. While I'm not sure if the Cartmel Master Plan was the best direction to take Doctor Who, I respect the hell out of this attempt to breathe new life into the show. It's bold, it's weird, and it imbues the show's universe with a sense of purpose and drive that would inform a lot of what Rubber Soul Davis, Sheev Moffat, and Fish and Chibs would bring to the show post-2005. Looms. 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 Just what in the insane and the membrane world of Doctor Who lore are looms? If for some unfathomable reason you need to find out, this is the video for you, I guess. Because in a world of climate insecurity, global war, and the death rattle of capitalism, what you need to know is defunct Doctor Who lore. So strap in, fools, cause we're going on a trip. Now, let's rewind the Doomsday Clock to a time when Gallifrey faced its very own interdimensional EastEnders Christmas special. Enter Pythia's Curse. Pythia, a powerful Gallifreyan matriarch, threw a big old cosmic curveball at the Time Lords with a curse. A curse aimed directly at whatever the Time Lords have under their robes. Picture it! Pythia, decked out in mystical robes, waving her hands and dropping the bombshell, "No more little time babies for you." Talk about a cosmic mic drop. Suddenly, making people the old-fashioned way was off the table. The curse was so potent that even Rassilon couldn't get the Time Lords in the mood, and he was Timothy Dalton once. So, what's a Time Lord to do when the Stalker's on strike? Well, support the strike, because we have nothing to lose but our change. Cue the entrance of Looms, or as I like to call them, Gallifreyan Gallifreyan turkey basters. Rassilon, being the clever chap he was, decided if we can't have natural born babies, we'll knit ourselves some babies, because Rassilon is a very normal individual. Side note, do you think the Doctor ever gets really hot and bothered around sewing machines? Anyway, Pythia, in her mystical fury, inadvertently became the catalyst for the loom-based reproduction system that defined Gallifreyan culture for millennia. I like to imagine her up in the time vortex, shaking her head and muttering, well, that backfired, didn't it? Now, let's talk about the Doctor's birth. According to this version of events, the Doctor was loomed from the genetic material of a being called the Other. Who's the Other? Legend has it that the Other played a pivotal role in the early days of Gallifrey, long before the Doctor grabbed a sonic screwdriver, long before the Master grabbed his special shrinky thing, long before Iris Wildtime grabbed her. There was the Other, who, alongside Rassilon and some other loser, were the three founders of Time Lord Society. Basically, the writers of Doctor Who decided the best way to restore mystique to the character was to give them a superhero origin story where they're a reincarnation of George Washington crossed with Jesus. Hang on, if the Doctor was loomed from the Other, does that make the Doctor an Other from another Other? The Doctor's origin story, and whether they should even have one, has had Doctor Who fans tearing chunks of flesh out of each other for decades. If you have to give the Doctor an origin, well, whether this is better than the Timeless Child or the Doctor being half human is down to you, I guess. Why not fight about it in the comments? And if you like this thing, then maybe you'll enjoy this video, where we talk about how a fan film beat the revival of Doctor Who to its biggest twist by the Wilderness Years. The Wilderness Years? The Wilderness Years? The Wilderness Years. That odd period of time after Doctor Who was cancelled by evil eldritch warlock Michael Grade, but before it was reanimated in 2005 by wholesome necromancer Russell T Davies. The Wilderness Years, a cold, dark, unforgiving, and very, very horny time for the little blue box show that could. Until it couldn't. With a TV return nowhere on the horizon, the fans and the people entrusted with the license decided to get weird with it. First, let's take a look at the wonderful world of books. I love a good book, especially the big, thick hardbacks. They make great weapons against the man who lives in my walls. The Virgin New Adventure series, published by Virgin Publishing, a subsidiary of Virgin, penned escapades for the 7th Doctor with a notably mature tone. And by mature, I mean some of them are really, really gross. From the Doctor abandoning Ace with a very, touchy-feely Gilgamesh, to everything in the novel Transit, which includes the banger lines, "The bitter nuts help keep her awake and take the semen taste out of her mouth." And what's the matter? You never seen two trains f***ing before? However, alongside this, you also got the first steps of people who would go on to shape the television revival, including Nightshade by Mark Gatiss, Love and War by Paul Cornell, and Damaged Goods by someone named Russell T Davies. Never heard of him. However, this would all come to an end when the BBC declined to renew Virgin's license. Instead, they decided to try and do things themselves. No way it could get any weirder than the VNAs, right? So anyway, let's talk about the War in Heaven. But it's not just books. Doctor Who also came to the exciting, zeitgeisty, and cutting-edge world of VHS, with BBV, a company producing Doctor Who-ish, maybe, if you squint it, not really, content that ranges from legally dodgy to straight-up doing crime. Speaking of crimes, since there's legal action being taken against them right now over this, I won't comment more, except to say that these things are wild, ranging from Doctor Who with the serial numbers gnawed off by hungry rats to whatever the Zygon porn movie is supposed to be. These films depended on an inherently deceptive model, promising something that looks close enough to real BBC merchandise that it could trick a prospective buyer, while emphatically not being that. What I can recommend is the early output of a little group you may have heard of called Big Finish, which features some of the most experimental and well-executed Doctor Who ever made. From spare parts to Creatures of Beauty to the Fearmonger, there really is something for everyone. Yeah, there's a few duds like Rapture, Minuet in Hell, and the frankly disgusting Necromantea, but there's also Holy Terror, Jubilee, Scherzo, and even some not written by Rob Shearman. However, while novels, audio dramas, and whatever that Zygon porn movie was supposed to be were great for the more niche segments of the fandom, the heart of the Wilderness Years beats with the persistent desire to bring Doctor Who back to television. Numerous attempts were made, each with its own blend of hope and disappointment. Oh boy, was there a lot of disappointment. The TV movie in 1996, a co-production between Fox and the BBC, may have been intended to revive interest in the series and capitalise on Paul McGann's sexy face skin to capture the hearts of a new generation, but the public simply wasn't having it. Probably for the best given where they were planning on going with it, but that's a different video. Overall, Doctor Who has always been a grab bag when it comes to quality, and that's never been more true than in the Wilderness years. The gems are some of the gemmiest gems to ever gem, with storytelling that could never exist in any other era of the Whoniverse, trademark Disney. However, there's also some of the worst shit you've ever seen. So I guess fundamentally it hasn't really changed, and we can take comfort in the fact that not even getting Michael graded was able to take that away. So I guess the real takeaway from the Wilderness years is it's a show about never, ever changing. Yeah. The best Doctor Who companion is Frobisher. Frobisher. Who's Frobisher? I'm glad you asked. Now, if you clicked on this video, you fall into one of three camps. Who the hell's the big talking bird? All hail the big talking bird. And I know who the big talking bird is, and to be honest, I think he's kind of mid. If you're in camp 1, enjoy the dopamine rush of having your fringe Doctor Who opinions validated by a stranger. If you're in camp 2, get ready to learn about one of the best things the Whoniverse, trademark Disney, has to offer. And if you're in camp 3, you're wrong. And probably a bad person. Picture it! The Doctor steps out of the TARDIS, ready for another mind-bending, morally ambiguous adventure. And who's right there by his side? Frobisher, the ultimate detective, bartender, and murderer. Enemies of the Doctor had better watch out, because this shape-shifting whiffadil can outwit them with a single quip and leave them questioning their life choices over a perfectly mixed Harvey Wallbanger. Or dead, fearless and pragmatic, this multiform master of mixology engaged in lethal tactics when needed. As the henchmen of his archenemy, Josiah W. Dogbolter, were quick to find out. Who's Josiah W. Dogbolter? We'll get to it. Frobisher's humble beginnings as a street urchin in a Zenon slum shaped the resilient and resourceful character we came to know and love. The harsh realities of his early life forced him into a cycle of deception, using his shape-shifting abilities to survive and make a living as a con man. His path took an unexpected turn when he encountered the 6th Doctor, living incognito as Avan Taklu in the 82nd century. Drawn into a bounty placed on the Doctor by Josiah W. Dogbolter, see, told you we'd get to him. Dogbolter is a minor recurring villain in various comics, including one that's technically set in the Marvel Universe. He's your standard evil space capitalist who wants to capture the Doctor's TARDIS for standard evil space capitalist stuff. However, he's also the closest thing Frobisher has to an arch nemesis. Speaking of Frobisher, Frobisher infiltrated the TARDIS with intentions of cashing in on the reward like the sneaky little so-and-so he is. However, after a few bumps, scrapes, and a daring escape from Dogbolter, they realised they were destined to be busy mates in the comics. And a couple of audios. Frobisher's decision to help the Doctor marked a turning point in his little penguin life. Oh, sexy Sixie's unorthodox compassion, psychotic bravery, and complete determination to deny the existence of colour theory resonated with Frobisher, forging a genuine bond that led them to embrace a life of time-travelling adventures, saving people, and murder. Speaking of murder, one of Frobisher's early adventures involved a confrontation with an alliance of aliens, previously defeated by the Doctor, including the illustrious Plink, who had the distinction of having been defeated once by each one of the Doctor's incarnations. It's like a game of roulette where you get punched in the throat no matter what number it lands on. Anyway, the alliance collapses, Plink gets splinked like Danny Pink, and the world's finest TARDIS team go on their merry way. This was a multi-Doctor story, by the way. But that's not important. Frobisher and the Doctor's adventures were chocky milk full of colourful characters like these. Take Dr. Ivan Asimov, a science fiction writer from the planet Sigma, Astra Bayless, an absolute scrub of renegade Time Lord, and the 10th Doctor, because he gets everywhere. But we all know a Doctor Who companion just isn't the real McCoy until they've taken on everybody's favourite key figure in the court of Tsar Nicholas II, the Master. And would you believe it, that very thing happened when the Doctor landed in a penguin preserve, was mistaken for insane, and lobbed into a 72nd century mental institution. Frobisher and Perry team up to spring the Doctor in a good old-fashioned jailbreak, when they also fall into a trap by the Master. I already said that bit. Keep up! Frobisher disguised himself as a hospital staff member, escorting Perry through the institution. However, their covert mission was compromised by the teensy little detail that all of the other staff were Autons. However, all of this is part of a wider plot by the 10th Doctor. Seriously, that man is inescapable in yet another multi-Doctor story that I may just cover in a future video, because it is wow. Anyway, TLDR, Frobisher helped save the day with the power of violence, just like Big Ten would have wanted. However, these salad days would come to an end when Frobisher contracted monomorphia, a disease which confined him to the form of a penguin. Despite this setback, he remained an essential and resourceful companion, refusing to be defined by his newfound disability because, as stated, Frobisher is the best Doctor Who companion. The turning point arrived when Frobisher chose to leave the TARDIS, opting to embrace his role as a detective once more. Post-Doctor, Frobisher, now recovered from his monomorphia and running the bar Bishers in human form, encountered the 12th Doctor unexpectedly. This meeting marked a pivotal moment, bringing Frobisher's life full circle, for the 12th Doctor had come with a simple plan. Take down Dog Bolter. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Posing as Chiyoko, a character with way too complex a backstory to explain here, Frobisher waited until a key moment and then took down Dog Bolter's henchmen with great vengeance and furious anger, kicking off a chain of events that leads to Dog Bolter facing justice once and for all. Result. For a character that could have very easily been relegated to a one-trick meme, Frobisher has had a ton of development over the decades. He arguably has more growth than a lot of the companions in the classic series, from his early life as a street urchin on Xenon to his adventures as the Doctor's personal superpowered assassin. If you disagree, feel free to share your wrong opinion in the comments. But in this house, Frobisher is best bird, best boy, best companion, and to think he accomplished all of this while naked. The 9th Doctor. The 9th Doctor. The 9th Doctor. The 9th Doctor, played by toxic bopping, heart-stopping jock-dropper Christopher Eccleston, the lone survivor of the last great Time War, the oncoming storm, the villain in Iron Man 5 or whatever, the one and only 9th Doctor. At least that's what the powers that be want you to think. But what if I told you everything you knew was a lie? Oh, that includes the title of this video, by the way, but more on that later. I'm gonna go over some of the other 9th Doctors in the Kafka-esque nightmare we call the Hooniverse, trademark Disney. The 9th Doctor. Vanilla Edition. Good old crispy buns Eccles cakes, bringing a world-weary, war-torn trauma to the character that captivates the hearts and minds of everyone who doesn't skip him and go straight to David Tennant. Though he only had one season to his name and very little chance of returning, old Deep Space Nine is still a lot of people's favourite Doctor, and when he once again refused to come back for the 50th anniversary, necessity bore a 3-time BAFTA-winning fruit in The War Doctor, the In-Betweener Doctor. Fighting in the cheeky little kerfuffle that was the last great Time War, this incarnation went about blowing up Daleks and generally doing things that would make the Doomslayer blush. Well, that's what's implied anyway. In practice, he's really just sort of grumpy and impatient, so kinda comes off like 10 and 11 of being huge drama llamas. But then again, they aren't the ones who decided to change their names after listening to Cradle of Filth once. The Shalka Doctor, however, clearly listened to Cradle of Filth like a bunch of times. Played by either Withnow or I, Richard E. Grant, in the webcast Scream of the Shalka, old Shalcock Holmes was almost the canonical 9th Doctor before a certain someone had other ideas. After losing the woman he loves, this version of the Last of the Time Lords travelled around with a robot duplicate of the Master, which is weird, but not as weird as the fact that the robot duplicate of the Master is played by Derek Jacobi, who would go on to play the fleshy not duplicate of the Master in, hang on, let me just check my notes, Doctor Who! The Comic Relief Doctor! In 1999's Curse of Fatal Death, written by Meavan Stoffert, we meet another incarnation of the 9th Doctorino, played by Rowan Atkinson from Johnny English Reborn and the music video for Ollie Murs' Move. This Doctor decided to retire from a life of adventure, crime, and adventure-based crime to settle down with a nice Earth girl called Emma, the first companion he'd ever had. This Ninth Doctor appeared in the comic book Party Animals as a potential future of the Seventh Doctor. This Doctor is notable for making a deal with a mysterious man in black to restore Gallifrey after its destruction, and being visually based on Nicholas Briggs' incarnation of the Doctor from the Doctor Who audio visuals, which makes this the first time a fan-made Doctor has been kinda sorta canonized. Will he be the last? Who knows? Who dares to dream? Well, there we have it. All 5 incarnations of the Ninth Doctor. Hang on, why is there another page of script left? The Tomorrow Windows gives us 2 more potential Ninth Doctors, one with eyeliner and the other with curly hair, which according to author Jonathan Morris references Eddie Izzard and Alan Davis, both rumoured to play the Doctor in 2003. But if that's not enough, we also have this Doctor from the 1989 board game Battle for the Universe, which saw this sexy beast travelling with Tegan, Romana, Ace and K9, and featuring such iconic enemies as the Daleks, the Cybermen, and Shockeye. But if that's still not enough, we can circle back to the Tomorrow Windows for a red-headed Doctor that ended up becoming Merlin, the Valeyard, and William Hartnell. So that's 11 ninth incarnations of the Doctor, and people say the show is confusing. Oh wait, there's also the one played by Stephen Fry. Pop quiz! What is the Doctor's home planet? If you answered Gallifrey, then you are wrong, and a filthy casual. Not that there's anything wrong with that, you disgust me. No, as subtly hinted in the big words in the thumbnail, the Doctor's true home planet is Jewel. Gallifrey? Never heard of it. Is that an island? So, Jewel, the alleged true homeworld of the Time Lords, the Shobogans, and according to Showbiz Whispers, Terry Wogan. A barren wasteland with scant urban development and even scantier world building. Apparently there's a president and some Time Lords, so basically the same as Gallifrey. The one big difference would be that Time Lords go mask off and just call themselves superiors, so picture it! Remember when the second Doctor got in trouble with the Time Lords over those sneaky little boys, the Warlords? That led to a trial, execution, and exile on Earth faster than you can say Raxacorico Thalapatorian. And who can forget Omega, the most powerful bloke in the universe, causing chaos that even the first 3 Doctors, sort of, had to team up to sort out. Both of these stories mention the Doctor's home planet, but they didn't give us a name. Now let's talk about Return of the Daleks, a comic story where the 4th Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith find themselves on Jewel, the Doctor's home planet. This concludes the segment where we talk about Return of the Daleks. Now you might be saying, but Ryan, Gallifrey is mentioned in the Time Warrior as the Doctor's home planet, and that's a 3rd Doctor story, and everyone knows that 3 comes before 4. Yeah, that's weird, isn't it? Mind you, in the 70s or maybe 80s, continuity just wasn't as much of a concern. That's also how you get gems like John and Gillian, or the Season 6B theory, and attempts to reconcile all this continuity drift is how you end up with a war in heaven. So, the next time you hear someone yelling about how Doctor Who is ruined because they changed the law, kindly remind them that when the 1st and 2nd Doctor's eras were being broadcast, the Doctor was canonically a human inventor from the future. Until they weren't. And that's what this video is really about. Lore. Lore can be great, it can enhance stories and give them extra gravity and resonance, but it can also be a prison for the mind. If Doctor Who had stayed a historical adventure series about a human main character, it would have died. If it had stayed a procedural about an alien super detective working to defend Earth with the government, it would have died. Doctor Who isn't about change, it's a story that does change, and we should let it. The whole reason the show has lasted as long as it has is because of weird little tidbits like this, and those could only happen in a world as messy, chaotic, and collaborative as the Whoniverse. Trademark Disney. Ace! 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 You know Ace, beloved companion to Doctor Who from Doctor Who, one of the most complex and groundbreaking characters the show has ever come up with, whose influence is still being felt in how the show approaches companions today. Yeah, that Ace, played by Sophie Aldred. Fun fact, when Sophie Aldred kicked that orc helmet in the Two Towers, she broke her toe, so that scream of pain is real. But did you know that Ace has a bunch of different versions of what happened to her between the classic series and the not quite so new anymore but never mind series of Doctor Who. Thanks to an ever-expanding, all-consuming technical monstrosity of an expanded universe, she's been everywhere, from a gun-toting time agent to a gun-toting vigilante to a gun-toting... Look, I said there were a bunch, I never said they were varied. One possible timeline for Ace unfolds on Gallifreyan, world of fancy robes, fancy cats, and fancy cats in fancy robes, where she becomes involved with the Time Lords and eventually joins the Celestial Intervention Agency. This path sees her undergoing rigorous training and undertaking missions to safeguard the fabric of time, although based on everything we know about the Time Lords, she was probably doing war crimes and shit. In another timeline, the Doctor and Ace land on the futuristic world of Heaven in the year 2570, where she crosses paths with a young traveller named Jan Rid, sparking a romance, including a mission to save the Doctor from the mysterious Vacuum Church, a religious collective of very edgy boys dedicated to the idea that life is meaningless and existence is pain, leading them to attack Gallifrey for some reason, which is both very metal and very confusing, kind of like lead poisoning. The narrative takes a heartbreaking turn when Jan is forced to make a heroic sacrifice in an attempt to stop said invasion of Gallifrey. But that's okay, because in another timeline, Ace became a badass time vigilante, known as Time's Vigilante, I guess. Equipped with a short-range time hopper mounted on a motorcycle, Ace established her base of operations in the vibrant setting of Paris in 1887. This Ace ends up with Count Nikolai Sorin, one of that bloke from the Curse of Fenric's ancestors, so that's nice. Wait, but if Ace and Sorin are both Wolves of Fenric, doesn't that mean that they're blood relic? However, Ace's weird incesty path as a time vigilante eventually intersected with the Doctor's once more, leading to her being kidnapped by Romana and sent to the House of Longbarrow, leading to the events of some book I can't for the life of me remember the title of. Now, the novel At Childhood's End, written by Sophie Aldred herself, does attempt to reconcile all of these by having Ace get hit on the bonds by a quantum anvil, giving her insight into all of the various lifetimes she's lived across the Hooniverse. And a concussion. So, I guess all of them happened? Except for that weird one from Mind Game where she dies alone and abandoned in the cold abyss of space. That one didn't happen. There's a good chance you've heard of The Flood, a 2004 comic strip featuring a future version of the Cybermen, which is an absolute darling among comic fans, YouTubers, and allegedly Big Rusty D's Nuts himself. So imagine my shock to discover that it's back. Our story begins with the TARDIS landing in... Out steps the 8th Doctor and his companion Destry. Now, this was actually my first experience with Destry, and well, it certainly was an impression. So, good rule of thumb when writing Doctor Who is that every adventure is someone's first adventure, so you kind of have to re-establish your leads in every episode. This is why a lot of Doctor Who stories start with Doctor and companion having some fun banter. It gives you a little sampler of what kind of characters they are. So anyway, at the end of page 2, Destry hate crimes an Asian man named Tony. But it's okay, because she also beats him up. Oh, there's also this bit where the Doctor covers for her offending a different food vendor by saying that she's from an Amazon tribe, which isn't great, is it? Doctor and Destry rope Tony and his wife Linda into this adventure just in time for the Cybermen to show up. And I have to say, I think a big factor in why this story is so well regarded is this Cybermen design. Sleek, modern for 2004, a big change while retaining all the essential elements. They are a bit flimsy looking, but don't worry, I'm sure that's nothing to worry about. It would be really funny if after hearing nothing but hype about how dangerous and powerful and genuinely scary these Cybermen are, something really embarrassing happened, like the Doctor easily defeating them by waving his sonic screwdriver around. So then the Doctor easily defeats them by waving his sonic screwdriver around. Oh. Well, at least they don't do something really stupid, like have the companion effortlessly beating them up. Guys, I think this story might be bad. Look, these Cybermen do end up doing some pretty horrific things later, but treating them like this sets the precedent that they aren't a serious threat and can be easily defeated, which takes a lot of the punch out when this story decides to start getting its hands dirty. Oh well. At least we get the heartwarming scene of Destry realising the grave mistake she made and apologising to Tony. Oh wait, that never happens. She does consider leaving them for dead though, but it's okay, because Tony and Linda getting dragged along on this adventure leads to them getting dragged along for cyber conversion. Don't worry, I'm sure Destry will redeem herself by saving them and learning why racism is wrong. Hey, where's the Doctor in all this? Well, he's been taken prisoner by MI6, who, after bragging about how they're so much cooler than those losers at UNIT, get defeated, captured, and used to demonstrate the Cybermen's new weapon, a deadly black rain, a dark water, if you will, that makes humans beg for the sweet release of cyber conversion. And I'm not gonna lie, this bit genuinely impressed me. Seeing the people we're supposed to rely on in a crisis get reduced to animals begging to be turned into machines is pretty affecting. I do question why the Cybermen have to strip them naked. Oh hey, there's Tony and Linda. So, Earth has been taken by the Cybermen on their flying cyber segways. The Doctor and Destry are being held prisoner and the entire human supporting cast are out of commission. Things seem pretty bleak, but don't worry, because the Doctor has a plan. He leaps into the time vortex, goes Super Saiyan, and Kamehamehas the Cybermen and their human hostages into oblivion! Result! Rest in power, Tony and Linda. I'm sure Destry is deeply traumatized by never getting to redeem herself for roping you into this miserable, miserable fate. Oh. Yeah, this one was a messy read. A big thing I noticed was just how influential this ended up being on New Who. I mean, we've got a scientific advisor that mega stands the Doctor, the time vortex giving someone god powers and potentially triggering regeneration, Cybermen taking the form of ghostly apparitions, the Doctor tapping into the world's collective consciousness, becoming a floppy messiah figure and saving the day with his superior Time Lord genetics. It's also interesting because this was originally intended to be a regeneration story for 8, with his little dip in the time vortex triggering a... Yeah, however, editorial guillotined the idea, so instead now he just goes full bad wolf with zero consequences. Between the messy plot, these Cybermen being incredibly overpowered and incredibly easy to take out, and the way Tony and Linda were treated, I can't say I enjoyed this one. It's interesting as a piece of history, sure, and the sheer spectacle and scale is impressive, but that doesn't make it good. What if Doctor Who actually came back in the 90s? And what if it was rubbish? Film at 11. Greetings, weary traveller! Today we're delving into the darkness of Doctor Who history, exploring the mysterious, coveted, and quite frankly, incomprehensible Leakley Bible. In March 1994, this leather-bound relic aimed to revolutionise Doctor Who, and wow a few Hollywood executives along the way. It wasn't greenlit. Commissioned by producer Philip Siegel and written by absolute mad lad John Leakley, the Bible played a crucial role in the pitch for an American Doctor Who reboot. And it's a very, very good thing it didn't get anywhere, because my god, this is, well, it's certainly an interpretation. First big shake-up, the series opens with the Doctor leaving Gallifrey for the first time, in his 8th incarnation. Thus rendering all media from the country Doctor Who originated in completely null and void. If for some reason this upsets you, might I suggest a trip to the British Museum? Second big shake-up, the Doctor and the Master? Actually, we'll get to this, but for now, I will say that they chose to represent the Master visually with a picture of the Valeyard. Oh, no. Don't worry, I'm sure they know what they're doing. Third big shake-up, a major character in this series and the driving force of the first season's plot is the Doctor's father, Ulysses. Because obviously the first thing you've got to add to any big budget reboot of a beloved character is daddy issues. What's next? They're going to tack on an underdeveloped love interest? Oh. There's a lot to unpack, but I think what really acts as the cherry on top of this mayonnaise sundae is the fact that this 46-page leather-bound monstrosity designed to make Doctor Who appealing and accessible to American film executives is narrated by Barusa. And Barusa is misspelt because of course it is. This is the thing that's really striking as soon as someone even skims this document. It's in this horrifying state of flux between being way too involved in Doctor Who's lore to be palatable to a casual audience, yet it has no idea how Doctor Who is supposed to work. If you want an example of this, which I guess you did because you clicked on a video about it, let's talk about what this series planned to do with the big 3 Doctor Who villains. The Master! First up, let's talk about the Master. You know, the Master, an amalgamation of the Doctor's darker side from somewhere between his 12th and final incarnation. Oh wait, that's someone else, isn't it? Sorry, I only found out what Doctor Who was today. Anyway, here's my 50-page pitch for a reboot. So, just gonna rip the band-aid off. In this reboot of Doctor Who, the Doctor and the Master are brothers. I could go into a million different reasons this idea is the peak of insanity and fundamentally misunderstands both the individual characters and the dynamic they have between each other, but oh my god, it's a spider doll! The Daleks! Because you know the original, iconic, perfect design for the Daleks. Just wasn't 90s enough. Now they look like this. What really bothers me about this, and it's a running theme as we look at this, is the assumption that there's something that needed to be fixed about the Daleks in the first place. Just look at our 2005's first Dalek episode, Shrinks the Daleks. What was it called again? In Dalek, they don't feel the need to make any radical changes to our screamy boys. They just up their power level a bit and make sure to give them plenty of squishy people to make sleep. I'm sure they're fine. They're fine, right? The Cybermen! Actually, you know what? We'll get to it. Because right now we're going to talk about episodes. So basically, Siegel and Leakley decided to go for a greatest hits approach to this take on Doctor Who. By which I mean, after jettisoning Doctor Who's decades-long and unbroken continuity out of an airlock, they decided to cherry-pick the best bits, make some changes, and then put their names on the scripts. Let's check them out. The Pirates! Barusa, convinced that the Doctor's father Ulysses was the notorious pirate Blackbeard for some reason, sends the Doctor to 18th century Spain, unintentionally falling into the clutches of treasure-hunting pirates. Oh no! So, the Doctor beats up the pirates and confronts his dad, but then Papa Who vanishes. Sorry son, I know you're on a quest and stuff, but us actually talking is Act 3 material, so bye! It's the smugglers with a bunch of story arc taped to its bum, basically. Oh god, this isn't going to be a pattern, is it? The Talons of Wang Chiang! TARDIS lands in contemporary New York City where mysterious murders linked to the deadly Black Scorpion. Led by Wen Chiang. I've heard this one before. This one's pretty much a straight remake apart from a setting update. Hopefully less racist, but then this is the era when the story was considered an unassailable, flawless giga classic. So, Earthshock! Okay, it's time to talk about the Cybes. Oh, what Cybermen you say? Not anymore! Leakley and Siegel looked at all the horrifying existential and medical themes possible with the Cybermen and thought, actually, you know what would be way cooler? Generic space barbarians! Described in the Bible as the pirates of the galaxy, slash and burn marauders from the planet Mondas. These are functionally a different monster, so all they've really accomplished here is locking off one of the most iconic things from the IP for the sake of making it theirs. As for the plot, it's Earthshock, but with everything unique and special and beautiful stripped away and replaced with homogeneous 90s action sludge. I'm sure there's a metaphor there somewhere. The Celestial Toymaker! Hold on, can we say that? It's another remake, except it turns out in the end that the Toymaker is nothing but a puppet of the Master. Do with that information as you please. The Horror of Fang Rock. Now, don't shoot! I'm the Doctor! Seeking dental help in Tombstone, Arizona, the Doctor allies with Doc Holliday for the shootout at the OK Corral. It's the gunfighters. I actually really respect the fact that they were going to try and pull up a pure historical, to be honest. Also, it's very, very, very funny that they kept the Doctor having a toothache, but decided to jettison the second most popular monster. Tomb of the Cybes! Tomb of the Cybermen minus Cyberman plus knockoff Ogrons plus the Master for some reason equals bad. The Ark in Space! It's the Ark in Space, but probably with moodier lighting and the Wirren looking a bit like xenomorphs, which is funny considering the Ark in Space came first. The Yeti! In 1953 Tibet, the Doctor pops into the Dalai Lama's gaff for a quick chat about the season arc when he bumps into Sir Edmund Hillary and the deadly Yeti. After a bit of tussle, it turns out that the Yeti are Neanderthals, so the Doctor has a bit of a chat with them and then everything is fine. No, really, that's how it ends. Honestly, would have liked to have seen this one because it's at least an original idea and oh god, this Bible is destroying my standards. The journey through the bizarre and misguided world of the Leakley Bible leaves us with a sense of relief that this was loaded into a canon and yeeted into the Mariana Trench. It's a haphazard concoction of questionable decisions that fundamentally misunderstands the essence of how Who do. From the unsettling reinterpretation of the Doctor and the Master as brothers, to the drastic alterations made to iconic villains like the Daleks and the Cybermen, the Leakley Bible appears to be an attempt at reinventing the wheel by making it so that every time the wheel turns, a parasitic wasp stings you in the eyeballs. Moral of the story, never, ever, 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 ever give Doctor Who to a big American film studio. Oh. Doctor Who was never a Time Lord. Doctor Who was never a Time Lord. Doctor Who was never a Time Lord. Doctor Who, the French sci-fi institution that's been enraging fans and baffling newcomers since 1963. From spreading anti-alien propaganda to gassing up problematic historical figures to the occasional cheeky bit of genocide, the Doctor has done it all. But let's take a moment to pause and revel in the fact that despite what the show has been telling us for decades, the Doctor was never a Time Lord. Do we have your attention? Good, let's dive in. The early episodes of Doctor Who were more concerned with educational adventures and historical accuracy than bone-crushingly deep lore. The Doctor was simply a mysterious traveller with an advanced time machine he couldn't use properly and a granddaughter he was more than happy to abandon in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Time Lords were depicted as a stagnant, highly advanced society obsessed with rules and non-interference that probably smelled of Werther's originals and piss. The Doctor, of course, was the black sheep of this particular family, the one who'd run away to explore the universe. The transformation from a mysterious traveller to a rebellious Time Lord added layers to the Doctor's character, but also muddied the waters of his origin. The 1996 TV movie featuring the 8th Doctor, played by Stephen McGann's brother, introduced the controversial idea that the Doctor might be half human. This revelation was largely ignored in later episodes because fans hated it and immediately threw a massive wobbly. But what we're interested in is how it adds another twist to the already convoluted narrative. Was the Doctor a Time Lord with a bit of human DNA thrown in for good measure, or was it just a throwaway line meant to confuse us even more? Speaking of confusing, the 7th Doctor, portrayed by international menace to ferrets Sylvester McCoy, was part of a grand narrative arc known as the Cil Master Plan. The plan suggested that the Doctor was a significant figure in Time Lord history, possibly even one of its founders. While the idea wasn't fully explored due to the show being cancelled by Michael Gray, the bastard, it laid the groundwork for future retcons and mysteries. Speaking of laying the groundwork for future retcons and mysteries, the most recent and controversial retcon and mystery came with the 13th Doctor, portrayed by Jodie Whittaker. The episode The Timeless Children revealed that the Doctor is the Timeless Child, a being from another dimension with infinite regenerative abilities. This bombshell upended the established lore, suggesting that the Doctor was not originally a Time Lord, but rather the source of their regenerative powers. The fans hated it and immediately threw a massive wobbly. Over the years, the Doctor's origin story has been subjected to numerous retcons and revisions, each adding new layers of headache-inducing insanity and pointless arguing. So what's the real answer? And here we come to the twist you've all been waiting for. When Doctor Who first hit the airwaves in 1963, the concept of the Doctor as a renegade member of a race of piss-smelling space aristocrats or an infinitely regenerating timeless bebe were barely a glint in the milkman's nutsack. Back then, the Doctor, played by William Hot Lips Hartnell, was just an enigmatic old git with a time-travelling box and a punch-out for getting into trouble, and Susan, his granddaughter, just a typical teenage girl from the future. So, there you have it. The truth behind the Doctor's origin uncovered. So, for the next time someone starts getting weirdly insistent about Doctor Who lore, just remind them that everything made after the Space Pirates is fan fiction. Susan Foreman. Susan Foreman. Susan Foreman. Susan Foreman, granddaughter of the Doctor, wielder of scissors, and ever-present mystery in the swirling vortex of the 9 hells we call the Whoniverse, trademark Disney. After getting kicked from the TARDIS in a moment that we all pretend is heartwarming and not just parental abuse, Susan's story remained a mystery, with various accounts detailing exactly what happened to her after getting the old shun from one. Today, we're going to take a cheeky little look at the Susan Diaries, published in 2002 within the It's the End But column of Doctor Who magazine. This 2-part short story took a hilariously messed up look at the life of Susan Foreman after sitting on the dock of the Who had ditched her during the Dalek invasion of Earth. You'd think being abandoned by your only living relative in a primitive, dangerous hellscape would be a bit of a downer, but, well, you'd be right, because it turns out being abandoned by your only living relative in a primitive, dangerous hellscape is in fact a bit of a downer. Our story kicks off in the 1990s when demolition work workers at a Shoreditch secondary school unearth a battered book about the French Revolution, annotated with a cocktail of corrections and scathing remarks. Among the book's pages, they find a collection of notes in various formats, including a futuristic quasi-hollow thingamajig, which humans haven't even invented yet. The workers' astonishment turns to horror as they delve into the notes. On December 26, 2164, we find Susan going absolutely spare at her abandonment. Her grandfather, with his quote-unquote senile old brain, mistakenly thought she fancied David, a quote-unquote mindless sporran basher with an even stupider accent than Yartek, and left her behind on a blasted out rock literally named after dirt. Resentful and vowing to punch the Doctor if they ever meet again, Susan tries to carve out a life on what she calls a third-rate planet, which, as a local boy, feels a little generous to be honest. After a short resentment-filled life which included being kidnapped by a flying triangle while trying to go shopping that only made her hate the Doctor more, David kicked the bucket and Susan underwent her first regeneration. Yep, Susan can regenerate, something the original show has never addressed, but this story dives into shoulder deep. Bored with Earth by 2279, Susan tries her hand at space piloting. Finding the pay lousy, she resorts to smuggling that good with a partner named Diamond. This shady venture crashes, literally, in 2281, thanks to a timely intervention by her granddad. She regenerates again to kick her Rax habit and enters rehab, where she marries a nice scientist and begins a long, fruitful hobby of hating her children. In this case, two twin boys who end up becoming quote-unquote mathematical little toads, which, once again, feels a little generous to be honest. So, Susan is overjoyed to learn that her sons have been kidnapped, ordering a crate of champagne in celebration. However, her week-long bender is brought to a screeching halt when the Doctor brings the twins back, leading to Susan vowing to murder the Doctor if she ever claps eyes on him again. By 2537, Susan, ever the opportunist, has become Earth President. With a cushy job, lots of manga, and a rather dishy general as her chief advisor, she's in a prime position for sweet Rowenge when the Doctor lands in her office, accused of working for the Dragons. Fun fact, dragon is a racial slur for the proud Draconian people. Susan thought she could get away with saying it, but oh no, not today. Today she's getting cancelled. Now we'll see the real you. So, Susan banishes the Doctor to the moon, celebrating her victory by getting absolutely hammertroned. However, her bender is ruined when the Doctor resurfaces days later, prompting her to send him on a dangerous mission to the homeworld of the Ogrons, where, just to be sure he gets killed good and proper this time, she makes sure the Daleks are waiting for him. By 2701, Susan got a little bit bored of ruling the Earth with an iron fist and relocated to a scenic little mining planet called Androzani Major. But old habits die hard, and by 2850 she's implicated in a president's murder, necessitating another regeneration to cover her tracks. Using her newfound wealth from selling a different kind of good, she buys her way into the loving arms of the Galactic Federation. Using the money she made as an intergalactic drug kingpin to become the Earth delegate to new Federation planets, Susan's travels take her to Peladon in 3009, where she annoyingly just misses the Doctor. A brief fling with King Peladon results in a daughter, whom she promptly abandons. Later, in 4598, she regenerates into a medical student on Necros, where she gets unalived by Daleks, leading to blindness in her next incarnation. However, her lack of vision doesn't stop her from berating the Doctor during a stay on Deva Loka. After stowing away with colonists back on Earth, she regains her sight in 5226, only to flee the planet amidst impending solar flares. In 27593, after yet another regeneration, Susan finds herself on Nerva Beacon, where after dealing with a wee bit of a pest problem, she sends a hot tip to the Sontarans that the Doctor is on Earth, and then hops onto the transmat hoping to never see him again. However, due to some shoddy electrical work by her grandfather, Susan ends up stranded in 16th century Italy. She once again vows revenge, with her vendetta carrying her through Edwardian England, where she endures yet another visit from her grandfather. Finally, by 1940, she's a young girl with amnesia from an air raid, losing track of her grudge. The diary ends in 1958, with Susan as a history teacher in London, blissfully unaware of her past. The final note is a sardonic comment about meeting the dish of a science teacher in the basement. Hang on a minute, that sounds just like Dodo!